Skin, skin, don't you know me? Skin, skin, don't you know me? Oh, do you know in order to protect oneself from being ridden by a hag, legend states that you must dress your bedroom in red, sprinkle salt all over your bed, sprinkle salt all over your bedroom floor, as well as laying a broom across your bedroom doorway. Many folks who believe in hag take it one step further to deter themselves from ever being ridden by a hag. They will sprinkle salt on the doorstep of the entryway of coming into their home. That way they're sure of never ever having the company of a hag coming to visit them. My ancestors, as well as many of your ancestors, believe that hags are dirty, slack human that roams the earth, especially in the community in which they live. But keep in mind, in order for the hag to come to visit you, it has to be invited. And when I say it has to be invited, that means you welcome him or her into your home during the daytime, sit down, talk, or whatever, and feel more than welcome to be there. So, in return, the hag will return that night to seek out its victim because it had an open invitation. My father was an excellent storyteller. I can remember many times as we sit around the tin heater that sits in the middle of the floor and listening to him as he began to tell those stories that were passed down by for many generations by his foreparents and their foreparents. He told a story that would send chills up my spine, tears would just roll down my cheek because I was so afraid the chill would just goosebump, give me goosebump. But I sat there and I listened because I wanted to hear. The more he told, the more I wanted to hear and so afraid, but was thirsty, eager to hear it. He told the story and it's called The Uninvited Guest, the Hag. He said there once was a lady that lived out in the countryside in a rural community. She was a well-liked lady in the community. She would go and visit her neighbors during the daytime, and then at night she would go out and seek her victim out. See, she didn't have any children, she and her husband. But like I said before, many of them back during that time, they were loggers, farmers, or carpenters that worked. And so the loggers will work away from home and they will go away from home like weeks at a time. So her husband basically was gone for weeks at a time. So this was a traditional thing that she would do. And so the husband would come home, paid no mind, and he would wash up because she had his water prepared, his food prepared. And she would just grab her shawl off the back of the chair and she would exit out the door. But this particular night, after this was an ongoing thing, but it was a tradition and a custom that if someone was ill in the community, it was no more than acceptable that you would go and sit with the family. He haven't heard of anyone being sick, but he didn't know he just getting home. So this night he asked her, "Hon, can you tell me where do you be going at night?" And she looked at him and she grabbed her shawl and said, "No way, hon, just out for a little walk and I'll be right back." So he turned around and continued washing up. But keep in mind, she was out to seek her victim out. So she went out and did her deed, finding her victim, going into the house, riding his back, drawing energy from and coming back up, coming home. But the next day, it happened to be two young men sitting under the tree from a break from working in the field. They began to talk to one another and tell on each other how tired they feel. As soon as the rooster fly up on the banister in the evening, as the sun go down, cock-a-doodle, they would go to sleep. But the next morning, as the rooster fly back up on the banister, waking them up, to tell them it was time to get up, it feels as if they have not even slept at all. And so one man just went on and talk and talk and talk. And the other one sat and listened. And it occurred to him what his grandmama was talking about. It coincided with what they were experiencing was a company of a hag. And he remembered what his grandma said that they must do in order to get rid of a hag. So he told the other young man, we need to get some salt. We need to get some pepper. We need to go around in this community and sprinkle salt and pepper all under the doorstep of each of these houses. We can't let no one see us. So they did it, and they decided that they were going to sit and wait and see who this hag could be. They had no idea, so they wanted to find out for themselves firsthand. But as darkness set in, they became the cowardly little boys. And they decided that they were going to go home because the next morning that they planned were everyone in the little community would know who was the hag. So they went on home and had their supper. And just as they anticipated, as the night began to settle, here comes the lady. She came up to the house where a young lady lived. She just visited earlier that day. She stood to the step and she did just like a snake did. Shed its skin, took it off. And she didn't pay attention. She placed her skin under the step, right on top of the salt and pepper. And she began to vaporize as like a smoke ball. And she went under the keyhole, under the doorway as well. And she walked towards the room where the young lady was fast asleep in bed. And at that time, she proceeded to spread herself over the young lady as if appearing to suffocating her, draining her of her energy. Although she screamed out for help for her mother and father, they couldn't hear her. She tossed and turned, but she found herself couldn't move. And after this hag finished riding her, the hag got up, walked out, and vaporized when it got to the door and went under the door outside. And she stood in front of this porch, and she had a smile on her face for a job she felt well done. She reached down and she picked up her skin. She took her right foot and she put it in. She took her left foot and she put it in. And she pulled the skin up on her. But there was something different about her skin this time. It was burning her. And she quickly jumped with the skin. And she looked down at her skin. And she said, skin, skin, don't you know me, skin? And again, she looked at her skin. And she said, skin, 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 don't you know me, skin? And at that time, she began to plead with her skin. And as she pleaded with her skin to no prevail, she finally gave up. She picked up her skin and she began to walk down that dark road to her little house that sat on the corner. When she got to her house, she pushed the door open and she walked to her bedroom where she grabbed a sheet. She took the sheet and she wrapped herself in it. She walked over to the bed and she laid on her bed with her face turned to the wall. And all of a sudden, unexpected, she heard the door open. At the same time as the door opened, her husband yelled out, "Hon, are you home?" Right then she knew she was doomed. No answer. "Hon, are you home?" He called out, but no answer. And so he walked to the doorway, and there he saw her, wrapped in that sheet. And at that time, he felt that his wife was ill, and he rushed over to the bed. "Hon, are you ill?" But still, no answer. He began to take his hand and unravel her out of the sheet. At his surprise, his mouth flew open, and he quickly dropped the sheet, and he ran out of the door. He got out into the street, and he began to scream to the very tip of his voice. And at that time, doors began to open. Folks came out of their house, but they didn't come alone. They had hoes, they had rakes, had shovels, they had axes, they had sticks, anything they could get their hand on, even a pitchfork. And when they got to the man and began to ask him what was wrong, he was speechless. The only thing he was able to do was point toward his house. And as he pointed toward his house, they looked at each other and they began to enter the house. And as they entered the house, they searched the house. And when they got to the room where his wife was, they knew right then when they saw her condition what she was. The secret unveiled. They walked over, and when they walked over to the bed, the older gentlemen in the community, they were supposed to be the wisest, and they made the decision. They knew what to do. And so they decided to get a barrel of turpentine because they know this had to have been done according to legend. And they half full of turpentine. They picked up the lady and put her in there as she was screaming, put the top on it, and she stayed in until she died. Her husband, following the month, he passed away from shame, humiliation, and grief. Although he has passed away, and everyone knew in that little community, looking at one another, because legend states that when one hag died, another one shall take its place. So wondering who would be the next.